Welcome here, it's Divine Echo, Naomi's resilience, finding hope after devastating loss in Bethlehem. Picture this, you're standing at the edge of your hometown after years away, but you're not returning in triumph. You've buried your husband. You've buried both your sons. Your hands are empty. Your heart is shattered, and the women whispering as you pass, they barely recognize the broken shell of who you once were. This isn't fiction. This is Naomi's story. And what happens next, the twist that transforms her from a woman who literally renamed herself bitter into the matriarch of kings, might just change how you see your own darkest moments. Because sometimes the end of everything you know is actually the beginning of something you never imagined possible. The unraveling. Let's rewind. Bethlehem, roughly 1100 BCE famine, has gripped the land, not just a bad harvest, but the kind of scarcity that makes parents watch their children's ribs show through their skin. Elimelech makes a choice that seems perfectly logical. Pack up his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and head east to Moab. It's about 50 miles away, across the Dead Sea region. Moab has food. Moab has opportunity. It's supposed to be temporary. But here's what nobody tells you about crisis decisions made in desperation. They rarely unfold the way you sketch them out in your mind at 2 a.m. when you're trying to convince yourself you're doing the right thing. Elimelech dies in Moab. The text doesn't give us details, doesn't soften the blow with explanation. One moment, he's there. Next, he's gone. Naomi is now a widow in a foreign land, but she still has her sons. They marry Moabite women Ruth and Orpah, and for maybe a decade there's a semblance of stability. A patchwork family. Different cultures, different gods, but shared meals and shared hopes. Then death comes knocking again. Mahlon dies, then Chilion. Both sons gone. Stop and sit with that for a moment. Not one loss. 3. The 3 men who represented her entire social safety net, her identity, her future lineage in a culture where lineage was everything. According to ancient Near Eastern customs documented in archaeological findings from Nuzi and Mari, a woman's status was completely tied to her male relatives. No husband, no sons. No legal standing, no inheritance rights, no protection. Naomi isn't just grieving. She's been systematically erased from the social structure. The return of the bitter. So she makes another choice. She's heard the famine back home has ended, and there's nothing left for her in Moab but graves and memories. She tells her daughters-in-law to go back to their mothers' houses, to find new husbands, to have the lives she can no longer provide for them. Orpah, after much weeping, turns back. But Ruth speaks words that have echoed through millennia. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Think about the magnitude of that decision. Ruth is choosing poverty. She's choosing to be a foreigner in a land where Moabites aren't exactly welcomed with open arms. Deuteronomy actually prohibited Moabites from entering the assembly of the Lord. She's burning her bridges for a grieving, bitter widow who has nothing to offer her but hardship. They arrive in Bethlehem right as the barley harvest begins. Historical records indicate this would be around April or May. The whole town buzzes with their arrival. Can this be Naomi? The women ask, and Naomi's response cuts like broken glass. Don't call me Naomi, she says. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Naomi, the name means pleasant. Mara means bitter. She's not hiding her devastation. She's not putting on a brave face. In a culture that often demanded stoic acceptance of God's will, Naomi is brutally, achingly honest. She believes God's hand is against her. She sees no future, no hope, no redemption arc waiting in the wings. And here's what's remarkable about this moment that we often skip past. Her honesty becomes the foundation for what comes next. Because you can't rebuild what you won't admit is broken. The fields of Providence. Ruth takes initiative. According to Levitical law, specifically Leviticus 19:9-10 and Deuteronomy 24:19, landowners were required to leave the edges of their fields unharvested so the poor, widows, and foreigners could glean. It was ancient Israel's social safety net, though calling it that makes it sound more dignified than the reality. Gleaning meant following behind the harvesters, bent over in the sun for hours, picking up whatever scraps they missed or dropped. It was back-breaking work that identified you as among the most vulnerable in society. Ruth happens to find herself in the fields belonging to Boaz. The text uses that word, happened, but then immediately reveals that Boaz is a relative of Elimelech, a wealthy, influential relative. The literary technique here is brilliant. It presents what looks like random chance, then pulls back the curtain to show the intricate gears of Providence turning underneath. Boaz notices Ruth, not in a creepy way, but in a way that speaks to his character. He's heard about her loyalty to Naomi. He instructs his workers to accidentally drop extra grain for her. He ensures she's protected from harassment, a very real danger for vulnerable foreign women in ancient agricultural settings, as evidenced by his specific instructions to his men not to touch her. He invites her to drink from the water his servants have drawn, share meals with his workers. When Ruth tells Naomi about her day, something shifts. You can almost hear it in the text. Naomi's response isn't bitter anymore. She's not calling herself Mara. She says the Lord bless him. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. Her strategic mind, dormant in grief, begins to whir back to life, because Boaz isn't just kind. He's a kinsman redeemer. The Threshing Floor Gambit. Here's where the story takes a turn that makes modern readers uncomfortable, and ancient readers lean in with anticipation. Naomi hatches a plan. She tells Ruth to wash, put on perfume, dress in her best clothes, and go to the threshing floor where Boaz will be spending the night guarding the grain after the harvest celebration. She's to wait until he's eaten and drunk and lies down to sleep, then uncover his feet and lie down there. The symbolism here is layered. In ancient Near Eastern culture, feet was sometimes a euphemism for something more intimate, and the act of uncovering and lying at someone's feet was a gesture loaded with both vulnerability and proposal. Ruth is essentially initiating a marriage proposal through symbolic action, putting herself in an incredibly vulnerable position and trusting Boaz's character completely. What's fascinating is that this plan is Naomi's idea. The woman who weeks or months earlier could only see divine punishment now sees opportunity. She's not passively waiting for rescue. She's strategically positioning her household for redemption using the legal and social structures available to her. Ancient Near Eastern texts from this period, including documents from Ugarit and legal texts from the Mesopotamian region, show that while women had limited power, they weren't powerless. Smart women worked within the system. Boaz's response reveals why this gamble pays off. He praises Ruth for not going after younger men, rich or poor. He acknowledges her reputation throughout the town as a woman of noble character, and he addresses the complication. There's another kinsman redeemer who has the first right of refusal according to the levirate law outlined in Deuteronomy 25:10. The tension here isn't will they, won't they romance. It's legal drama, property rights, inheritance law, the survival of a family line. Everything hangs on the decision of a man we've never met. The gate reversal. The next morning, Boaz goes to the town gate, the ancient equivalent of City Hall, where legal transactions were witnessed by the elders. He finds the other kinsman redeemer. And here's where Boaz reveals he's not just kind, he's shrewd. He presents the situation in stages. First, there's land belonging to Elimelech that Naomi is selling. The other kinsman is interested. He can acquire good land, expand his holdings. But then Boaz adds the crucial detail. Whoever acquires the land must also marry Ruth the Moabite to maintain the name of the dead with his property. The kinsman backs out immediately. I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate, he says. Scholars debate exactly what he means, but the likely interpretation involves either the complications of bringing a Moabite into his family line or the economic reality that any son from Ruth would inherit the redeemed property, meaning he'd be spending his own resources to build up another man's line instead of his own. Boaz steps in. The transaction is sealed with the symbolic removal of a sandal of practice, corroborated by archaeological findings showing footwear being used in legal ceremonies. The elders bless the union, invoking Rachel and Leah, the matriarchs who built up the house of Israel. Ruth and Boaz marry. And here's where the story shifts from personal restoration to historical significance that reverberates through millennia. The legacy. Ruth bears a son. They name him Obed, and the women of Bethlehem, the same women who gasped at Naomi's return, now surround her with celebration. They tell her, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Better than 7 sons. In a culture where sons were everything, where Naomi's tragedy was defined by the loss of her sons, the women declare that Ruth's love and loyalty has exceeded the value of the very thing Naomi thought she needed most. The text places Obed in Naomi's arms, not Ruth's Naomi's. The women say Naomi has a son. The genealogy is restored. The bitter woman who felt abandoned by God is now the grandmother in a line that will include King David, and according to Matthew's Gospel, ultimately lead to Jesus Christ. Naomi's story doesn't erase the reality of her losses. Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion are still dead. The years of grief are still real. But what transforms isn't the past. It's the future that gets rewritten through perseverance, loyalty, strategic action, and providential timing. Here's what Naomi's resilience actually teaches us. Hope isn't the absence of bitterness. It's what happens when you're honest about your bitterness, but don't let it have the final word. Redemption isn't going back to what you lost. It's discovering that the path forward might look nothing like what you originally planned, yet somehow leads somewhere more significant than you could have designed yourself. The woman who returned to Bethlehem empty, who renamed herself bitter, who saw no future, she became the matriarch of kings, not because she denied her pain, But because she kept moving through it, accepted unexpected help, made strategic choices when opportunities appeared, and remained open to the possibility that the story wasn't over. Your losses are real. Your bitterness might be justified. But Naomi stands in the ancient text as a monument to a stubborn truth. Sometimes the end of everything you knew is the soil in which something unprecedented grows. Sometimes the bitter woman becomes the grandmother of redemption itself.